So a few things that we have going on here: a secure work area, 360-degree perimeter, all of our proper PPE. And what he is doing is pruning the dead wood out of this tree. One thing to consider climbing trees is your rope angles and the stresses that you're putting on the structure of the tree. So pre-climb inspections, you want to check the trunk, the canopy for any signs of unsafe conditions. Not every tree is going to be perfect, but there is a certain point where you say, nope, we're not going to climb that. What we have here is a black locust tree. It is a pioneer species, in the stages of forest recovery. It'll be one of the first species to start inhabiting less than ideal areas. The priorities of pruning, especially in a dynamic area such as campus, safety, plant health, aesthetics. Obviously safety would always be at the top, and pruning for functionality. Sometimes every day of the week, kind of depends on, I guess, the hazards that we've received calls about. And a dead branch over here is different than one like right in the middle of a field on the other side of alumni, Few pruning tools that we have here: saws and pruners. Some of them are folding, some of them fixed, and little sheaths to protect you and your equipment, or hand pruners, always in their locked position. We got our PPE on, being safe out here. So when you're pruning, what we have here is ideally your first undercut, top cut, and then your final finish cut. This is, up closer to the tree. Undercuts to help keep the bark from stripping. And we're getting into a season where it's tough to determine the difference between some dead and live branches, so we have to use different techniques. As you can see, the bark is coming off of this branch, a good sign that it's dead. Some species, checking the buds, that's a great telltale sign. Fungal growth, that's another. But, in the middle of summer when everything's green, brown leaves, that's another easy sign. So to let you see this in person, so pull our saw out, make our first cut away from where we want our final cut, our undercut, and then our top cut there. Now we can, examine our branch collar here and make a nice clean cut perpendicular to the branch. And so quite a few things that we can do with our pruning over the life of the tree. We can save its energy from it trying to repair itself. We can also, especially earlier in its life, be able to improve the overall structure, alleviating, codominant branches, or rubbing branches, like we have an example here that over time that creates wounds on the tree. So if we can get rid of crossing branches, when the wind blows they rub, they injure each other. For the overall structure of the tree, it's best earlier in its life. The codominant leaders, we want to try and cut those out as early as possible, because later on in the tree's life they will be growing against each other. You'll have bark pressed up against each other, growing and creating wounds on each leading branch, and sets it up for fungus to set in, and then eventually a strong wind comes in and the tree splits apart pretty easily. Other equipment, so all of these, we have the hand varieties, but we also have, you can put these on a pole to be able to reach, 10, 15 feet off the ground effectively. And, always want to try and make your proper undercuts. Some of these higher branches, say you're, 10 feet off the ground with your pole saw, you may want to make a couple undercuts from different sides, just to ensure that you don't tear any bark when you make your top cuts, or maybe even make several cuts farther out, more than 3, maybe 5, 6, to take the weight off the farther end of the branch and work your way back in a controlled manner. The branch collars, we got a couple good pictures for you. So you can bring your camera in here, get a good little close-up of this. And these are great examples of being able to see the branch collars. So when we cut, we want to stay outside of the branch collar. That's the competing cambiums from the trunk and the branches. And here's a good example, old dead branch. We would want to cut this off, but without disturbing the bark from the trunk. Ideally, as early as possible. Like that oak tree over there, from a different angle you can see it better, but you can see the two main branches growing up. They're pretty much about the same size. But 30 years ago would have been the most ideal time, maybe even before that, because they're still competing against each other. And over time they're just going to keep competing, and then they'll be growing up against each other. So when that tree was 15 feet tall, that would have been a much more ideal time to cut one of those out so that the other one can continue being the more dominant leading branch. Pruning is a lot of different trade-offs. you know, the safety, the plant health, the aesthetics, the functionality of everything. The thing is, if we did it now, there would also be a rather sizable wound compared to the size of the trunk. And you know, if you cut one of those leading branches all the way back at the union, that in itself would be a large percent of the canopy, and we want to stay away from that. So if we were to do it now, in stages over time, maybe, you know, a quarter of it, and then maybe in a year or two, you know, a little bit further back, just to minimize the overall percentage of the canopy that we are removing. Because, you know, there'll be other pruning cuts that we make, you know, the dead wood, you know, anything close to the sidewalk. But that is not, at this point, you know, it's, you know, pretty well established, so we wouldn't want to just go in there and just cut the whole thing off. Well, we use lac balsam, and that is, you know, industry accepted and recommended. It helps the wood breathe a little bit, but also keeps pests and diseases from setting up, or less chances of it. So in general, the tar, I would not approve of that. The lac balsam, yes. But the best thing you can do, proper pruning cuts. Because proper pruning cuts, you can save the future energy of the tree, you know, making good cuts to where it seals itself up pretty well, rather than, let's say this whole branch was still there, you know, the tree would have to, you know, wait for it to break out and break off at this point. So it could spend unnecessary energy trying to, you know, seal around more of the branch than it really needs to. And if we can make a good pruning cut, we can save some energy of the tree. Happy trees are healthy trees. Bob Ross painted them. We're just trying to maintain them. I've been waiting to use that one.